If you're over 60 and eating this seemingly healthy vegetable daily, you could be unknowingly sabotaging your blood pressure control. What I'm about to share shocked even me when I first discovered it in my clinical practice, and it's affecting thousands of seniors who think they're doing everything right. I'm Dr. Susan Miller, a cardiologist with over 20 years of experience treating hypertension and cardiovascular disease. Throughout my career, I've seen countless patients struggle with blood pressure control despite following their treatment plans religiously. But what I discovered about certain vegetables completely changed how I counsel my patients, especially those over 60. Before we begin, if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications so you never miss another health tip made especially for you. If you enjoy this video, send your video suggestions and questions in the comments. I read every single one, which helps me create more videos and help more people just like you. Now, let me tell you about Mrs. Margaret Santos, a 72-year-old retired teacher from Porto Alegre. Margaret was the picture of health consciousness. She walked every morning, took her blood pressure medication without fail, and prided herself on eating what she called a perfect diet. Her kitchen was filled with fresh vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins. She avoided salt, processed foods, and anything her doctor had warned her about. Yet during our consultation, she was frustrated and confused. Despite doing everything right, her blood pressure readings were climbing. Her home monitor showed numbers creeping from 130/80 to 150/95 over just 3 months. When I sat down with Margaret and went through her daily food diary, something caught my attention. Every single day, without fail, she was consuming large amounts of pickled vegetables. Pickled cucumbers at breakfast, pickled beets with lunch, pickled onions as an afternoon snack, and fermented cabbage with dinner. In her mind, these were healthy vegetables, and technically, they were vegetables. But what Margaret didn't realize was that the pickling and fermentation process had transformed these innocent vegetables into sodium bombs that were wreaking havoc on her cardiovascular system. You see, when vegetables undergo pickling or heavy fermentation with salt, their sodium content can skyrocket to levels that rival or even exceed processed junk food. A single serving of pickled cucumbers can contain anywhere from 400 to over 1,000 milligrams of sodium. That's nearly half of the recommended daily limit for someone with hypertension in just one small side dish. For someone like Margaret who was eating these at every meal, she was consuming more than 3,000 milligrams of sodium daily from vegetables alone, on top of the sodium naturally present in her other foods. But here's where it gets even more concerning for those over 60. As we age, our bodies become increasingly sensitive to sodium. The kidneys, which are responsible for filtering and excreting excess sodium, become less efficient with each passing decade. The blood vessels lose their elasticity, making them less able to accommodate the fluid retention that comes with high sodium intake. And the baroreceptors, those tiny sensors in our arteries that help regulate blood pressure, become less responsive. This means that the same amount of sodium that might have caused a minor blood pressure increase in your 40s can cause a dangerous spike in your 60s and 70s. If you're still watching and finding this information valuable, comment 1 below to show me you're with me. Let me explain the mechanism behind this in a way that makes sense. When you consume high amounts of sodium, your body tries to maintain the delicate balance of electrolytes in your bloodstream. To dilute this excess sodium, your body holds on to more water. This increased fluid volume means your heart has to work harder to pump blood through your vessels. Imagine trying to push water through a garden hose versus trying to push the same amount of water through a coffee stirrer. The increased pressure is what we measure as elevated blood pressure. For people over 60, there's an additional factor at play. The renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, which is your body's primary blood pressure regulation mechanism, becomes dysregulated with age. This system controls how much sodium your kidneys retain or excrete. In younger people, this system can compensate reasonably well for dietary indiscretions. But after 60, this compensation becomes sluggish and less effective. It's like having a thermostat that takes longer and longer to adjust the temperature in your house. Now, I want to tell you about Mr. Antonio Ferreira, an 80-year-old retired mechanic from Sao Paulo. Antonio came to me after his wife passed away, and he had started preparing his own meals for the first time in 50 years. Being health conscious and remembering his wife's love of traditional preserved foods, he decided to make his own pickled vegetables just like she used to. He was so proud of his jars of pickled peppers, carrots, and cauliflower lining his refrigerator shelves. Antonio would eat these pickled vegetables with every meal, thinking he was honoring his wife's memory while staying healthy. Within 2 months, he started experiencing severe headaches, dizziness, and swelling in his ankles. His daughter, worried about these symptoms, brought him to my office. His blood pressure was dangerously elevated at 170/100. When we ran his labs, his sodium levels were at the high end of normal, and he was showing early signs of fluid overload affecting his heart. The emotional impact on Antonio was profound. He felt like he had failed his wife's memory by making the preserved vegetables wrong. But the truth was, he had made them exactly right, following her traditional recipe, which called for large amounts of salt. The recipe that had been perfect for occasional consumption had become dangerous when eaten multiple times daily. We had a heart-to-heart conversation about how loving someone's memory doesn't mean we have to follow every tradition, especially when our health is at stake. Antonio broke down in tears, not from the diagnosis, but from the realization that he had been inadvertently harming himself while trying to stay connected to his late wife. But wait, there's more to this story that you need to know. It's not just pickled vegetables that pose this risk. Canned vegetables, even those marketed as healthy options, can be surprisingly high in sodium. A can of regular green beans can contain over 400 milligrams of sodium per serving. Canned tomatoes, which many people use daily in cooking, can pack anywhere from 300 to 600 milligrams per cup. Even frozen vegetables, if they come with seasoning packets or sauces, can be loaded with hidden sodium. Here's something that shocks most of my patients. Celery, that innocent-looking vegetable that's often recommended for heart health because of its beneficial compounds, is actually one of the highest sodium vegetables in its natural state. 1 cup of celery contains about 80 milligrams of sodium naturally. Now, that might not sound like much, but if you're juicing celery as part of a health trend and drinking large quantities daily, you could be consuming several hundred milligrams of sodium from what you think is pure, healthy vegetable juice. And then there's the issue of vegetable broths and stocks. I can't tell you how many patients have told me they switched to vegetable broth thinking it was the healthier option compared to chicken or beef broth. But commercial vegetable broths can contain anywhere from 500 to over 900 milligrams of sodium per cup. If you're using this as a base for soups, cooking grains, or as a health drink, you're adding substantial sodium to your diet without realizing it. Let me share the story of Mrs. Helena Costa, a 68-year-old retired nurse from Belo Horizonte. Helena should have known better, she often said with a rueful smile. As a nurse, she had spent decades educating patients about heart health. But when she retired, she decided to embrace a plant-based diet after watching several health documentaries. She was eating what she considered a perfect diet: lots of vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and plant-based protein alternatives. Helena was particularly fond of a popular plant-based diet that emphasized vegetable juices and smoothies. Every morning, she would make a large green juice containing celery, spinach, kale, and beets. For lunch, she would have a hearty vegetable soup made with store-bought vegetable broth. Dinner often featured plant-based meat alternatives, which she didn't realize were heavily processed and loaded with sodium to enhance flavor. She snacked on seaweed sheets, thinking they were a perfect healthy snack. Within 6 months of this dietary change, Helena noticed that her rings were getting tight on her fingers. Her shoes felt snug by the end of the day. She was urinating more frequently at night and feeling increasingly fatigued. When she came to see me, her blood pressure had risen from a well-controlled 120/75 to 165/98. She was devastated. She had been trying so hard to be healthy, and she felt like her body had betrayed her. When we analyzed her diet, the sodium content was staggering. Between the daily celery juice, the commercial vegetable broth, the plant-based meat alternatives, and the seaweed snacks, she was consuming well over 4,000 milligrams of sodium daily. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. This retired nurse, who had spent her career warning patients about sodium, had fallen into a trap of assuming that plant-based automatically meant healthy and low sodium. If this is surprising to you, wait until you hear about what happened next. We put Helena on a modified plan where she made her own vegetable broth with no added salt, switched to fresh vegetables instead of juices, eliminated the processed plant-based meats, and limited her celery intake. Within 3 weeks, her blood pressure started dropping. Within 2 months, she was back to her baseline numbers. The relief and renewed energy she felt were transformative. But more importantly, she learned that healthy eating isn't just about what category of food you eat. It's about understanding what's actually in your food. Now, you might be thinking, Dr. Susan, are you telling me I can't eat any pickled or preserved vegetables? Absolutely not. What I'm telling you is that awareness and moderation are key, especially if you're over 60 and managing blood pressure. An occasional serving of pickled vegetables as a condiment or flavor enhancer is very different from making them a staple at every meal. Here's what else you need to understand about sodium and blood pressure in older adults. Sodium doesn't work alone in your body. It has a complex relationship with potassium, and this relationship becomes even more important as we age. Potassium helps your kidneys excrete excess sodium and helps relax your blood vessel walls. Many of the vegetables we're talking about, when fresh and unsalted, are actually excellent sources of potassium. But when they're heavily salted or pickled, the sodium to potassium ratio gets completely out of balance. Fresh beets, for example, are an excellent source of potassium and contain compounds that can actually help lower blood pressure. But pickled beets have most of the benefits canceled out by the massive sodium load from the pickling brine. Fresh cucumber is hydrating, low in sodium, and contains some beneficial nutrients. Pickled cucumber or pickles lose much of their beneficial properties and gain a sodium content that can undo any potential health benefits. I want to share one more case that really drives this point home. Mr. Jose Almeida, a 75-year-old retired bus driver from Curitiba, came to me after his 3rd emergency room visit in 6 months for dangerously high blood pressure. Jose was taking 3 different blood pressure medications, yet his numbers were all over the place. Some days they'd be reasonable, other days they'd spike to dangerous levels. This inconsistency was puzzling until we really dug into his eating patterns. Jose lived alone and wasn't much of a cook. His daughter would bring him home-cooked meals twice a week, and he was grateful for them. But on the other days, he relied heavily on convenience foods. Not fast food or obviously unhealthy choices, but things he considered reasonable. Canned vegetable soup, frozen vegetable meals, packaged salad dressings for his fresh salads, and his favorite snack, store-bought hummus with baby carrots and celery sticks. What Jose didn't realize was that nearly every single one of these convenience items was loaded with sodium. The canned soup alone contained over 800 milligrams per serving, and he would eat the whole can. The frozen meals ranged from 600 to over 1,000 milligrams. The salad dressing added another 300 milligrams per serving. Even the hummus, which seemed so healthy, contained about 200 milligrams per quarter cup, and Jose would easily eat a cup while watching television in the evening. On the days he ate his daughter's home-cooked meals, which were made with fresh ingredients and minimal salt, his blood pressure would be reasonably controlled. But on the days he ate his convenience foods, his blood pressure would spike. This pattern of ups and downs was actually more dangerous than consistently elevated blood pressure because it put extra stress on his heart and blood vessels. Jose's wake-up call came when he had a small stroke. Fortunately, he received immediate treatment and recovered fully, but the experience terrified him and his family. His daughter, who felt guilty for not being there more often, started preparing larger batches of low-sodium meals that he could freeze and reheat. We worked together to find truly low-sodium convenience options for the days when he didn't want to cook. Jose also started reading nutrition labels carefully, something he had never done before. The transformation was remarkable. Within 4 months, Jose's blood pressure stabilized to the point where we could actually reduce one of his medications. His energy improved, his thinking became clearer, and the constant worry about another emergency room visit lifted from his shoulders. But beyond the medical improvements, Jose told me something that stuck with me. He said he finally understood that eating well wasn't about deprivation or bland food. It was about being smart and aware of what goes into your body. Now, let me give you some practical guidance on how to navigate this issue in your own life. First, if you love pickled or fermented vegetables, look for low-sodium versions, or make your own with minimal salt. Many traditional pickling recipes use far more salt than is necessary for flavor or preservation. You can often reduce the salt by half or more and still get delicious results. Fermentation can even be done with very little salt if you use the right techniques. Second, read labels religiously. Don't just look at the front of the package where it says healthy or natural or plant-based. Flip it over and check the sodium content per serving. And pay attention to what constitutes a serving, because it's often much smaller than what people actually eat. As a general rule, aim for foods with less than 140 milligrams of sodium per serving, and ideally, much less. Third, when buying canned vegetables, always look for the no salt added or low sodium versions. Yes, they might taste a bit bland at first compared to what you're used to, but your taste buds will adjust within a few weeks. You can always add your own herbs and spices for flavor without adding sodium. Fresh garlic, onion powder without salt, black pepper, herbs like basil, oregano, and cilantro, and acid from lemon or lime juice can all add tremendous flavor without any sodium. Fourth, if you're using vegetable broth, either make your own or look for low-sodium versions. Making your own broth is easier than you think. Save your vegetable scraps like onion ends, carrot peels, celery leaves, and herb stems in a freezer bag. When you have enough, simmer them in water for an hour or two, strain, and you have homemade, virtually sodium-free vegetable broth that you can freeze in portions. Fifth, be especially careful with condiments and seasonings. Soy sauce, even the reduced sodium versions, is extremely high in sodium. Teriyaki sauce, barbecue sauce, ketchup, and most salad dressings are sodium bombs. Look for low-sodium alternatives or make your own. A simple dressing of olive oil, vinegar, or lemon juice, Dijon mustard, and herbs can be delicious and sodium-free. But here's something crucial that many people overlook. It's not just about the sodium you add consciously. It's about being aware of hidden sodium in foods you think are healthy. Cottage cheese, which many people eat as a protein-rich snack, can contain over 400 milligrams of sodium per half cup. Canned beans, even when you rinse them, still retain significant sodium. Pre-made smoothies and juices can have added sodium for preservation and flavor enhancement. Even some medications and supplements contain sodium that can add up if you take multiple pills daily. For those over 60, I recommend keeping your total daily sodium intake below 1,500 milligrams if you have hypertension or heart disease, and below 2,300 milligrams if your blood pressure is normal. To put that in perspective, the average American consumes over 3,400 milligrams daily, with much of it coming from sources they don't even think about. Let me address another important point. Some of you might be on medications for blood pressure that are diuretics or water pills. These medications work by helping your kidneys excrete more sodium and water. If you're taking these medications but consuming high amounts of sodium, you're essentially working against your medication. It's like trying to bail water out of a boat while someone else is pouring water in. The medication can only do so much if you're constantly overloading your system with sodium. There's also the issue of something called salt sensitivity, which becomes more common and more pronounced as we age. Some people's blood pressure is highly responsive to sodium intake, while others are less affected. Unfortunately, there's no simple test to determine if you're salt sensitive. The best approach is to assume you are, especially if you're over 60, and to keep your sodium intake moderate. If you want to test your own sensitivity, try eating very low sodium for 2 weeks and monitor your blood pressure carefully. If you see a significant drop, you know you're salt sensitive. Here's something else I want you to understand. The damage from chronic high sodium intake goes beyond just elevated blood pressure numbers. Over time, high sodium intake can lead to stiffening of your arteries, thickening of your heart muscle, damage to your kidneys, and increased risk of stroke and heart attack. It can also worsen heart failure if you already have it, contribute to osteoporosis by increasing calcium loss in urine, and even increase your risk of stomach cancer, according to some research. But I want you to hear this loud and clear. This is not about living in fear of food or making yourself miserable with a bland, restrictive diet. This is about being informed and making conscious choices. Food should be enjoyable and nourishing, both physically and emotionally. The goal is to find a balance where you can eat foods you love while protecting your health. Think about Margaret, Antonio, Helena, and Jose. Each of them thought they were making healthy choices. Each of them was blindsided by hidden sodium in foods they considered beneficial. But each of them also found a path forward that allowed them to eat well, feel better, and gain control over their blood pressure. Margaret learned to enjoy fresh vegetables and reserve pickled ones for special occasions. Antonio created new traditions of preparing fresh foods while honoring his wife's memory in other ways. Helena discovered that plant-based eating could be truly healthy when she focused on whole, unprocessed foods. And Jose proved that even living alone and relying on some convenience foods could work if you're smart about which ones you choose. If you have high blood pressure, or if you're over 60, I encourage you to take a week and write down everything you eat and drink. Then, look up the sodium content of each item. You might be shocked at what you discover. That morning vegetable juice? Check the sodium. That healthy frozen dinner? Check the sodium. Those baby carrots with your favorite dip? Check the sodium in the dip. That bowl of canned tomato soup that seems so wholesome? Definitely check the sodium. Knowledge is power, and awareness is the first step to change. You don't have to overhaul your entire diet overnight. Start with one change. Maybe you switch from regular canned vegetables to no salt-added versions. Maybe you start making your own salad dressing instead of buying bottled. Maybe you cut back on pickled vegetables from daily to once or twice a week. Small changes add up to significant impacts over time. I also want to emphasize the importance of working with your healthcare provider on this journey. If you're on blood pressure medication and you make significant changes to your sodium intake, your blood pressure might drop, which is good, but it might drop too much if your medication dosage isn't adjusted. Never stop or change your medication without consulting your doctor. But do have an open conversation about your diet and whether dietary changes might allow for medication reductions over time. Remember, your body is remarkably resilient and responsive. The blood vessel damage from high blood pressure and high sodium intake can begin to reverse when you make positive changes. Your kidneys, unless they're severely damaged, can recover some function when you reduce the sodium load. Your heart muscle, which may have thickened from working too hard, can actually remodel and become more efficient again. But this takes time and consistency. As we age, we have to be smarter about how we take care of ourselves. The body that could handle anything in your 20s and 30s needs more careful attention in your 60s, 70s, and beyond. But this doesn't mean giving up on enjoying life or food. It means honoring your body by giving it what it truly needs rather than what clever marketing or old habits tell you it needs. Before I close, I want to leave you with this thought. Every meal is an opportunity to nourish yourself or to harm yourself. That might sound dramatic, but it's true. The choices you make 3 times a day, every single day, add up to either health or disease. But here's the good news. Every meal is also an opportunity for a fresh start. If you've been consuming too much sodium unknowingly, you can start making different choices right now. Your next meal can be the beginning of better blood pressure, more energy, and a healthier future. Pay attention to what you're putting in your body. especially those innocent-looking vegetables that might be hiding dangerous amounts of sodium. Read labels, ask questions, and don't assume that just because something is marketed as healthy or natural, it's right for you at this stage of your life. Trust your healthcare provider, monitor your blood pressure regularly, and be willing to adjust as needed. To all of you over 60 watching this, you have the wisdom and life experience to take control of your health. Use that wisdom to look beyond surface appearances and dig deeper into understanding what's really in your food. Your heart, your kidneys, your blood vessels, and your brain will thank you for it. And remember, it's never too late to make changes that matter. Whether you're 65 or 85, your body can respond positively to better choices starting today. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you been surprised by sodium in foods you thought were healthy? What changes are you going to make after watching this video? Share your stories and questions below, because your experiences might help someone else who's facing similar challenges. And if you found this information valuable, please share this video with anyone you know who might benefit from it, especially those over 60 who are managing high blood pressure. Remember, I'm here to educate and empower you, but I'm not here to replace your personal physician. Everything I've shared today is general information. Your specific situation might be different, and you should always discuss any dietary changes or health concerns with your own healthcare provider who knows your complete medical history. Take care of yourself, be kind to your body, and never stop learning about how to live your healthiest life. Until next time, this is Dr. Susan Miller reminding you that knowledge and awareness are your most powerful tools for health and longevity.